Hello and welcome to another edition of Chicago Crossing Model Railroad. It's me, Eric, here with you. Glad to be with you again down here, actually in the train room for a change. How about that? Anyways, as you know, there's a lot to do on the layout. A lot of that is really big stuff. But hey, in the meantime, there's also a lot of small things to do. And when in the midst of a big thing, it never hurts to actually go ahead and do a little thing. Either you have the time or you have the inclination. I know for me, if I think about it enough, probably it's time to do it. So today, well, I'm wearing a red shirt, and that's because today we'll be painting and placing fire hydrants. So fire hydrants are those sort of objects that in any urban environment just kind of hide in plain sight. When's the last time that you've paid attention to what a fire hydrant looks like wherever you might happen to live? Well, maybe after this, you'll actually go out and take a look at them and recognize these things are almost like the fingerprints of a city, or even a fingerprint of a part of a city or a particular park or something like that within. New York is a great example. You know, the classic fire hydrant design with the cap that almost looks like a bonnet on top of the main barrel of the fire hydrant with two outlets and sometimes a third larger outlet. Those are called O'Brien style fire hydrants, but they're one of many different styles that you can actually find in New York. Well, Chicago, for its fire hydrant design, uses actually just kind of a single design through the entire city, and it's called the Chicago Twin, or the Chicago Standard design. It used to be they were painted different colors. Now they're standardized red, and they have a collar around them that has a different color, and that actually indicates the size of the main that supplies that hydrant. So with that in mind, today we're going to be painting Chicago fire hydrants. And this will be fun. It's a little bit of an adventure because they are absolutely tiny, tiny, tiny things. These are 3D printed models. They actually have all the prototypical features I would anticipate for a Chicago hydrant. So that gives me an opportunity to replace some of the, kind of classical East Coast O'Brien style bonnet fire hydrants that I've currently got on there with something that's a little more Chicago. And, just like in the real world, this is one of those details that I guarantee you 99% of the visitors down to Chicago Crossing are going to miss. But for somebody who has lived in Chicago, certainly they will maybe recognize that looks like the hydrants that they saw. One way or another, it's an object that hides in plain sight. For the careful observer, it's fun because there's another thing that ties this layout to a place and to a time. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to be basically a two-step process. I prime pretty much everything with this. This is XF69 NATO Black. That serves as a prime coat. Tamiya paint is remarkable. It basically functions both as a paint and as a primer. And then what we have here is some XF7. So this is just flat red. And there's nothing particularly special about the red that's used for a Chicago hydrant. So I'm not terribly worried about getting like a more specific color than that. So I'm going to be shooting kind of carefully within the spray booth. And as always, for Tamiya paint, it's excellent pigment, so it'll be diluted into 99% IPA. Let's go ahead and make some paint, and then let's go ahead and shoot it, see what happens. All right, well, there you can see we've got some red fire hydrants. These are not like a bright red. You notice it's actually more of a dull red, and you can see that, the coverage for that is also not 100%. You can still see areas of gray and things like that. And that's actually intentional. Bright colors on a model railroad are more apt to create a toy-like effect, especially for really small objects like this. On top of that, by coating this with a dark color first and then coming back with a light color, it actually provides some illusion of shadow. And that's particularly true underneath the two 4.5 inch outlets up here. The red paint doesn't necessarily get into there. And so you do actually get a sense of some shadow and a little bit of depth here. So this for me is kind of perfect. So let's take these back to the other bench space, and let's go ahead and see if we can paint little collars on these for the different colors that might indicate what fire main they're connected to. I am using sand yellow. This is a model color Vallejo acrylic, and I'm using an 18-aught brush. As you can see there, it has a nice thin set of bristles to it. So a little bit of paint. This is going to require some degree of finesse and stupidity all mixed up into one to try to paint something this utterly tiny. But it's not Chicago Crossing if we don't occasionally push the envelope somewhere into foolishness. So let's actually see what we can do here. Yeah, not so bad. Presumably in the city, they don't actually send out artists to paint these things, to paint the little yellow collars on them. Presumably it's just, somebody with a spray can, and that's kind of enough. Actually, they probably don't even spray paint it. I'm pretty sure they just put a little slop coat on it or something like that. Who knows? Not my profession, I must say. Although after this, I think I will tender my application to the city of Chicago to become their chief fire hydrant painter. Anywhere there's a yellow collar that needs painting, I'll be there. Next is a little bit of hand detailing on these. Now, if you take a survey of Chicago area hydrants, you'll see a few different features of them. Number one, a lot of them are actually pretty clean in terms of any graffiti and things like that, but that is not exclusive. There are actually little bits of graffiti here and there on fire hydrants. You can find it. You can also find either former paint colors as the paint chips away, I've seen, or, somehow they ended up splattered with some sort of paint colors for that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these hydrants and add a little bit of detailing. And then what I will do is add a little bit of paint fade on them as well. I'm using a few different colors. Number one is I'm using a US olive drab as a wash to darken down or dirty some of the paint. I'm also using this is basically flat blue That replicates a couple of hydrants I've seen with like spatters of blue paint on them for whatever reason. Then I've got, and this will be important a little bit later, but just to put all the colors out there, flat red. That is not going to be a direct match with the red that these fire hydrants are, and that's because of the combination of colors via airbrushing. And so what I've used to match that is actually burnt umber, and use that as a mix with the red in order to try to match the shades of paint there. I'm basically just adding little bits of graffiti onto some of these. It's not something you can really have be all that legible on here, and it's because these things are so tiny relative to a grain of rice. A grain of rice is actually larger than the models that you are seeing here. All right, so next we're going to take a little bit of olive drab, and we will likewise do a little bit of hand detailing with that color. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do more of a wash with it. Just add in some water down here, and we'll do just a little bit of wet on wet. I want to get almost all of the water off of the brush here. And I'm just going to come down around the bottom and just a little bit of this discoloration, as if this hydrant has not necessarily been painted in a while, and so it's got just the littlest bit of off color down there. We can even do a little bit of the same up at the top. And so now what I'm going to do is to take a little bit of this orange wash, just take one of these models here. And again, here I've got to be a little bit careful about making sure I grasp these things correctly. And then basically just going to add this kind of onto the top of the model here. And all I'm doing is really just creating differences of shading and light and dark. All right, up next, what I'm going to do is paint some of the valves on the top where you would take the wrench and actually open the hydrant. For that, I'm going to use a dark blue gray model color paint. And so what I'm going to do is, again, just a barely loaded brush, and I'm just trying to accentuate that tiny little molded dot on the top of these. I don't know. Let's do something absolutely absurd. So on these hydrants, you can find small chains that actually hold the caps to the outlets. Let's model those chains. So, oh, this is a dumb idea, but at some point it's your model and you can decide how dumb you want to be with it. And for me, if I haven't pushed the envelope, then what am I going to do? So what we're going to do is we're going to use this. This is 40 gauge master wire supply. This is basically the same stuff that I had used to make the concertina wire on the scrapyard fence. So what we're going to do here is to basically try to attach the wire to this end cap as well as the collar. And so essentially what that means is that it is a U shape from here to here and a U shape from here to here. And then what we will do is we'll come back and we'll have to paint that chain. The chains are painted red. And I'm going to just try to clamp it a little bit to keep it in scale. So now we have essentially a very, very small U shape like that. So now let's take it down to the cutting surface. This is just a piece of wood. But what I'm going to do is just shift the camera a little bit this way, and I'll just do the cutting right there. And God help us if you can actually see this. That would be amazing. Okay. So I've got the piece of wire right there, so you can see it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to use this forceps to hold it down like this. And then I'm just going to, cut the piece. I'm actually going to come around and just hold the U shape because I want that to hold its conformation. So I'm just going to slice this wire. Okay. And so now what you can see is we actually have like a little U shape there. I'm going to just shorten it on one of the ends. Anyway, let's come back to the model Hydrant now. And let's shift that a little bit so you can see. And now here is the touchy part. All right, I've got it attached the way I want it. That took about 3 minutes of finagling. So we're going to reapply the CA. I'm basically using a makeshift applicator for that, using just a tiny piece of wire. So location 1, location 2. Let's see if we can, first I'm going to just try to get it to stick to the one spot. Oh, we got it. Yeah. Wow, that was, yep, I think we got it. Showing there. There we go. So yeah, that's actually not so bad. All right, so just in conclusion, there you have it. It is a micro-detailed fire hydrant model that is prototypical to the Chicago area. And now those are the only hydrants that are here on the layout. So with that in mind, is this something anybody actually ever needs to do? Absolutely not. You know, for me, I enjoy the challenge associated with modeling, and in this case, doing actual micro scale level of modeling is kind of fun. Let's leave it at that. I don't think I have any more fire hydrant times in me today. So with that, have a great rest of the weekend. And take care. I'll see you next time on Chicago Crossing.